So, the Deshaun Watson ruling came out today. Look, I don't want to make this a Deshaun Watson is guilty video. I don't want to make this a he should be suspended indefinitely. I just want to lay out a few things because I think a lot of people are probably still don't know a lot about this situation. If you don't know, Deshaun Watson, Cleveland Browns quarterback, was suspended 6 games today by not the NFL, but Sue L. Robinson, who is a retired federal judge. Which, if you ask me, why are you having a retired judge handle this case? This was the first case of an NFL player in terms of NFL personal conduct to be handled by someone out of the NFL. Now, there is a really good article. There is a really good article on the New York Times about this case. If you just look up New York Times Deshaun Watson, you'll find it. Basically, what Sue L. Robinson, again, the person who is handling this case and is the retired federal judge who was in charge of handing out the suspension for Deshaun Watson in this case, she ruled that a season-long suspension was not warranted. It was not warranted. 6 games was appropriate because of the fact that even though there was evidence, text message evidences that Deshaun Watson had contacted multiple women for inappropriate actions. I'll just leave it at that. He had contacted multiple women, and again, there are just, even I didn't know this, but it wasn't just 24 women that Deshaun Watson had gotten massages from or had massage therapists that he hired. There were 66 women in total, both from Deshaun Watson, who he hired himself, and from the Houston Texans, who Deshaun Watson had signed NDAs and other just very fishy things. Look, 24 women was pretty bad, but 66 women. There were 66 women who were hired or contacted by either Deshaun Watson or the Houston Texans. And we get a 6-game suspension. I shouldn't say we because it's not like I was sitting here waiting for I didn't want Deshaun Watson to be suspended, but he deserved to be suspended longer than 6 games. Especially when you compare it, and it's the thing, because this wasn't handled by the NFL. I think a lot of people need to understand that. This was not handled by the NFL. This still has not been handled by the NFL. They have had no say in this. Because of the collective bargaining agreement that was signed a couple of years ago, about 2.5 years ago, Roger Goodell has no say in the suspension. It used to be Roger Goodell had the say. He handled these cases. But now it's left to somebody else outside of the NFL. And because it was really the first case of personal conduct policy handled in the NFL since that collective bargaining agreement, we get a suspension for Deshaun Watson that just doesn't make sense. A 6-game suspension for somebody who hired or contacted 66 women and more than likely did some inappropriate things with many of them, or tried to. That's the thing, he tried to, and he persuaded it. And if you look at the New York Times article, it's even said by Sue Robinson, again, the federal judge who was hired to handle this case. She even said there were text messages. There is evidence of Deshaun Watson being guilty. But the thing that set it apart for her was that there was zero violent behavior. There was non-violent behavior from Deshaun Watson the whole time. Again, this is like, why are we hiring someone who's retired as a judge to handle this? I wouldn't hire Dan Marino to be my quarterback right now. He's been retired for 40 years. I wouldn't hire a retired anybody to do anything for me. Why are we? That's just one part of this. Another part is, so if everything is just non-violent behavior from NFL players throughout the rest of time, they're never going to get any sort of suspension no matter what they do. I mean, Josh Gordon's behavior a few years ago was pretty non-violent, and he got multiple year-long suspensions. Tom Brady's behavior was pretty non-violent. And again, going along with the similarities of this case, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, you can go back and try to find any evidence of any one of the New England Patriots staff members, players, coaching staff. You cannot find a single piece of evidence that anybody related to the New England Patriots deflated any footballs. And I'm not trying to make this a Tom Brady's innocent case. I'm trying to draw what is the comparison between Tom Brady's case and Deshaun Watson's case, and that Sue Robinson decided that a 6-game suspension, only 2 more games than what Tom Brady got for a deflated football in 1 game, received as a suspension. And there's so many guys I could bring up where their suspension, and you compare it to what the suspension has been given to Deshaun Watson, it just doesn't make sense. And for the judge to just say, oh, well, there's no violent behavior, even though we have all this evidence from text messages. We have text message evidence. We're just going to say, no violent behavior. 6-game suspension. This is something, and look, Roger Goodell does have the final say in this. I shouldn't have said that he has no say, because he will have the final say in this. He is the commissioner of the NFL. If he is smart, not even if he's smart, if he's a able working human being, and he gets the same evidence that the judge got, that Sue L. Robinson got, he needs to extend this suspension, because this just doesn't make sense. And if you're going to suspend the guy, he has to be guilty, right? You can't suspend somebody that's not guilty. And Sue L. Robinson, as she said, and you can read the full entire, on that New York Times article I talked about earlier, you can read the full article given by Sue L. Robinson detailing the suspension. You can go and read that for yourself. It's pretty mind-boggling that it's 6 games, because, like I was saying, if he's guilty, he's guilty, and he needs to be suspended more than 6 games. If he's not guilty, you can't suspend him at all. A 6-game suspension is trying to meet the middle of a suspension and a no suspension. You have to just give him the full suspension. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll get you next time, Deshaun. Like, what? What are we doing here?